10's Late News with Sandra Sully.
Tonight, banned Olympic cyclist Shaun Eadie wins the biggest battle of his career.
Very happy with this result, and one hurdle at a time, so very happy to have this out of the way.
The second murder in 150 years rocks the residents of Norfolk Island. And the government gets its long-awaited report on why ASIO got it wrong about Bali and Iraq. Good evening. Also tonight, Mark Latham promises equal pay for women. Another suspected terrorist before a Sydney court. And Will Smith celebrating the success of his 6th hit movie, I, Robot, Down Under. But first tonight, controversial cyclist Shaun Eadie is almost certainly on his way to the Olympic Games in Athens after drug trafficking allegations against him were thrown out tonight. 10 reporter Frank Coletta has the details.
In an appeal lasting almost 4 hours, the career of Olympic medal-winning cyclist Shaun Eadie was put back on track. He took an appeal to the Court of Arbitration for Sport against an infraction notice served upon him by the Australian Olympic Committee and Cycling Australia, and the 35-year-old emerged victorious.
A good hearing, a fair hearing, and the charges against me were dismissed, so we're very happy with that. I think the biggest thing we've learned out of this is that there's no winners, and looking forward to a relaxing night's sleep, which I haven't had in quite a while, and we'll have more to say in the next day or so. So, thank you. Thoughts of going home to bed to sleep a lot sounder than I have the last few days.
But the legal process has not ended. Shaun Eadie will now take another appeal to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, where he will challenge his omission from the Australian cycling team, and that is likely to happen in the morning.
There is a withdrawal of his nomination, and in effect there'll be procedures set in place tomorrow morning to have that withdrawal invalidated, so there's no further obstacle to him representing Australia in the Olympic Games.
But Shaun Eadie's fight may not end tomorrow. It's likely that Ben Kirsten, the cyclist that was brought in to replace Eadie, will lodge his own appeal in the same court to try and remain in the Athens Games team.
Thanks, Frank. Frank Coletta there with tonight's breaking developments. And of course, more on that story and drug crises in sports tonight, right after this bulletin. International tennis coach Gavin Hopper is on trial, accused of indecently assaulting a 14-year-old girl. The court heard Mr. Hopper was a teacher when the alleged abuse took place 20 years ago.
Gavin Hopper has coached tennis stars Mark Philippoussis and Monica Seles, and currently runs an academy with former great Pat Cash. But it's a younger student that's led to his trial on 3 counts of indecent assault and 8 counts of gross indecency. He's accused of having a 4-year affair with a pupil at a Melbourne private school in the late 80s when he taught there. The prosecutor claimed Mr. Hopper exploited the teenager's crush on him and abused his authority, power and trust as a teacher. Melbourne's County Court heard when the alleged victim was 14, Mr. Hopper offered to tutor her in maths. It's claimed he massaged her instead, then said, "Are you in the mood for maths?" The court heard she then kissed him, sparking a sexual relationship which allegedly included regular encounters in the defendant's home and car and at school. The jury was told one schoolgirl thought she'd seen them having sex in Mr. Hopper's office, while others claimed to have seen the defendant kissing or fondling his alleged victim. He has pleaded not guilty to all charges. Christopher Still, 10 News.
Australian Federal Police have charged a 25-year-old Norfolk Island man with murder after the death of a leading politician, in another shock for the island's residents today. Federal Police say it appears 60-year-old Environment Minister Ivans Buffett was shot around lunchtime on the remote island off the east coast of Australia, but they're awaiting a post-mortem later this week.
Well, I was deeply shocked to hear that the Deputy Chief Minister and Minister for Lands, Mr Toon Buffett, was shot in his parliamentary office today and unfortunately did die.
The tightly knit community recently attended the coronial inquest into the murder of Sydney woman Janelle Patton, her killer still not found. 3 federal police officers will fly out of Sydney to the island tomorrow. Victoria Police believe they have found more human remains in the tip they're searching for the signs of murdered woman and her daughter. Officers began scouring the Mornington tip south of Melbourne after the disappearance of Anna Kemp and her 20-month-old daughter Gracie Sharp. The woman's husband John Sharp was charged with their murders after allegedly confessing to the killings. A Sydney court has heard chilling claims that a man planned to attack ASIO. The suspected terrorist also allegedly planned to capture and execute 2 of the agency's officers.
20-year-old Zaki Malla is charged with preparing to stage a terrorist attack and threatening a Commonwealth officer. The former supermarket stacker is facing a committal hearing where lawyers for the federal government alleged he intended buying a handgun, taking 2 ASIO officers hostage and killing them. The plan outlined to an undercover policeman posing as a journalist. Malla allegedly received $3,000 from the undercover officer for a videotaped final message. Malla wanted police to kill him in a shootout and make him a martyr. His motive, the prosecution said, was to get law enforcement agencies to go easier on Australia's Muslims. Foreign Affairs targeted because they refused to give him a passport on security grounds. John Hill, 10 News.
Another bombing in Baghdad. Up to 15 people were killed and 40 others injured when a petrol tanker was blown up next to a police station. American sources say a suicide bomber drove the tanker up to the station and detonated it. Most of the dead were police waiting their daily assignments, but many wounded were also civilians. The police station was wrecked along with several vehicles, including police cars. It was the 3rd bombing in Baghdad in the past week, claiming at least 30 lives. The long-awaited report into why our spies got it wrong about Iraq and Bali has been handed to the federal government. But Prime Minister Howard is confident it will prove that our agencies weren't lent on by his government.
Campaigning in Darwin, the Prime Minister came face to face with an anti-war sentiment that's divided the nation.
John Howard is a war criminal. We don't want your US wars. We don't want your US bases. And we don't want a US puppet as a leader.
Mr Howard shrugged off the jibe.
The decision that we took to go into Iraq was the right decision. It was based on our good faith assessment of the intelligence available at the time.
Prime Minister says he's now received a report from former spy chief Philip Flood into the performance of our intelligence agencies. It's expected to show they got it wrong over Iraq and Bali because of poor analysis and resources. Mr Howard taking out some insurance ahead of the release.
The intelligence services were at no stage subject to any pressure or intimidation from the government.
The opposition holding fire.
The stakes are high. It's about the intelligence capacity and effectiveness of this nation. It's about being effective in the war against terror.
While Mark Latham's busy mending fences with the Americans and supporting joint training facilities with them in Australia, there's some fierce opposition to the idea in the top end. The local ABC played a sample of callers to the Prime Minister.
The Americans, they were overpaid, oversexed and over here.
Does this mean that we've become more of a target?
Mr Howard says the comments aren't typical of most Australians. Paul Bongiorno, 10 News.
An emotional farewell to the surfer who lost his life in a shark attack off the south coast of WA last weekend. Hundreds gathered at one of his favourite beaches to pay tribute to 29-year-old Brad Smith.
Ian Smith led the charge.
Let's go. Come on, Nancy.
With the same Malibu board he taught his son to surf on at just 11 years of age. More than 100 board riders hit the water at Secret Harbour's Surf Beach this afternoon. A specially made surfboard carrying the flowers from Brad Smith's funeral, held in Fremantle 3 hours before.
Yeah, 7.6 surfboard with the similar black pinstripes that Brad had on his surfboard, and yeah, that's what we're going to use for today.
Far offshore, they formed a circle, linking hands around an inner group, then cheering as fire joined water. Brad's mother, family and friends looking on, a symbolic returning of his soul to the sea he loved. Ian Smith says he even managed a short ride on the way back in. It's just the way he wants his son remembered.
But this today, to see what they've done for Brad, all of them, just like to thank him very much. It's just overwhelmed. We just can't get over it. It's absolutely brilliant.
Oh, I'm just so proud. They're such a fantastic group of people. They've been together so many years. They're just wonderful.
Nick Way, 10 News.
Mark Latham promises equal pay for women. That story follows the break in tonight's late news. The ban on Queensland citrus products to be extended from midnight. And the vain battle to save a baby humpback whale on the Gold Coast. A pledge from the federal opposition to bridge the wage gap between men and women. Flanked by his wife and female members of his front bench, Mark Latham promised to raise women's wages and promote equal pay with men. He also pledged to set up a federal fund to support women in pay cases.
And over the last 8 years, the gap has widened. We want to do everything we can to narrow the gap, and having a pay equity fund is a positive contribution in that regard.
Labor is also vowing to provide better access to childcare, but is yet to release the details. Time to check finance tonight, and at ComSec, Tom Petrovsky. Tom, local stocks still manage quite well despite overseas influences.
That's true, Sandra. Life's being made rather hard by stocks on Wall Street, which are having their longest losing streak in almost 2 years. At the same time, the price of crude oil is threatening historic highs, but nonetheless, local stocks continue to perform in a resilient fashion. Resource stocks were an important part of today's improvement. They're being helped by the belief that interest rates around the world might not go up as aggressively as thought earlier. But banks continue to be a challenge as investors work their way through last week's profit downgrade from the NAB. Of the big four, Westpac was the best improver today, up by more than 0.75%, whilst the NAB was at the back of the pack, down by 1.2%.
And Tom, what did the market think of Woolworths releasing its sales results today?
That's right, the grocer said that fourth quarter sales were up by more than 6%, weaker than the previous period, but in line with the market's expectations. They expect sales momentum to grow as they add another 110 petrol stations to their network, offering discount fuel. Most importantly, they reaffirmed profit guidance of 12 to 15% per share, and as a result, the shares were up by almost 2% today.
Thanks, Tom. ComSec's Tom Petrovsky there. Local markets defied overseas trends. The All Ordinaries rising slightly. It was saved by strong commodity prices. Resources stocks led the way, with Rio Tinto jumping 50 cents, BHP Billiton adding 14. The banks were generally weaker, led by the National. It slid 34 cents. The Combank was down 13, but Westpac gained 14. The Australian dollar has strengthened on the back of a weakening greenback. Tonight it's buying 73 1/3 American cents, 79 yen and 59 euro cents. Gold is trading at $406.25 US an ounce. More bans on fruit and plant movements as Queensland's citrus industry crisis deepens. Although the outbreak of citrus canker has been confined to just one property, the race is on for inspectors to give the all clear elsewhere.
The ramifications of the citrus canker outbreak are blooming. Now all Queensland citrus fruit has to be certified disease-free before it can be moved or sold anywhere within the state.
So those movement restrictions come into place midnight tonight.
The government is hurriedly training more fruit inspectors to stop delays in product reaching the consumer.
We have to find an additional at least 100 inspectors.
The fruit inspections were demanded by other states. They'd wanted to ban the sale of citrus-related plants like the popular hedge mock orange in Queensland nurseries as well. That move was eventually rejected. The nursery industry is, to say the least, relieved.
That would be devastating for us not to be able to sell citrus and citrus-related plants.
But the Industry Association says sales interstate are still in jeopardy, threatening a $6 million industry. The government is pushing ahead with plans to burn another 40,000 trees on evergreen farms, the source of the outbreak. Mark Sulo, 10 News.
A baby humpback whale caught in shark nets off the Gold Coast has died. Experts from SeaWorld and the Fisheries Department struggled in vain to save the whale, trapped in the nets off Mermaid Beach. Other whales were seen nearby as the baby struggled to free itself. Marine experts removed the calf's body under the watchful eye of her mother and 2 adult male humpbacks. The death again sparking calls for the nets to be removed during the whale's migration season. There is much more still to come in tonight's late news. As the storm cleanup continues across southeastern Australia, the storm chaos continues to spread. Hundreds dead as floods ravage many Asian countries. And in sports tonight, American racing driver Dale Earnhardt Jr. lucky to survive this crash. The big cleaning up after Sydney's weekend of wild weather could take days. Hundreds of state emergency service volunteers are mopping up after the devastating storms, desperate to repair damaged homes before there are any more heavy downpours.
The wind shear factor was fierce at Cronulla. The stormy weather strong enough to tear off the entire roof of this home as its family of 6 slept. The Saffels moved from Missouri 15 months ago, thinking they'd left the tornadoes behind them. Now they're holed up in a motel for the night.
All the insulation is just blowing everywhere inside the house. It's basically raining inside the house.
On nearby Gunnamatta Bay, the wild winds caused 16 boats to break their moorings and slam into rocks and jetties. This vessel salvaged this afternoon. Its hull cracked, windows smashed. 500 SES volunteers working around the clock, answering around 1,000 cries for help, the damage stretching from the Illawarra to the mid-north coast. But not everyone's ducking for cover in this howling weather. It's tailor-made for Sydney's boogie boarding set.
Saw the weather forecast and just swells up. Just got hit it.
Sean Fewings, 10 News.
Earthquakes and flash floods have left 2 people dead and forced thousands of people from their homes in New Zealand. The storms coinciding with wild weather wreaking havoc across Asia, where hundreds have died.
Earthquakes rocked the central North Island near the popular tourist spot Rotorua, parts of the region already trying to cope with the worst flood in living memory. Jolts measuring up to 4.6 on the Richter scale sent a tree crashing onto a car, killing 1 woman, floodwater stirring a mudslide which buried 67-year-old Myra Freeman, who was seeking refuge in her home.
Major shocks, major tremors, and the whole wall shook and
everything was smashing and breaking.
Thousands have been evacuated, farmers racing to move stock to higher ground as the water continues to rise.
Because it's coming out from underneath and there's all the pumice and stuff underneath. It's all washing out underneath and it keeps coming down.
Freak storms have lashed central China and caused a heartbreaking end to an 8-hour rescue attempt. Despite rescuers' best efforts, 2 men who were stranded on a truck were swept away. Similar scenes in Japan, where the death toll from torrential rains continues to rise, almost half a metre dumped in some areas during the past week. More than 110 km/h winds have pounded Siberia, killing at least 6. Trees have been ripped from the ground and entire towns have been left in the dark. At least 2 people were electrocuted after touching live wires. Martine Griffiths, 10 News.
But in California, thousands are being forced to flee their homes by raging bushfires. Canyons have been engulfed by flames as almost 800 firefighters try to bring the inferno under control. Thousands of hectares have been blackened, but so far no injuries or structural damage has been reported. High temperatures and overgrown vegetation are fueling the blaze, but experts hope they will soon gain the upper hand. Victoria's Bracks government has gone into bat for pioneering Aboriginal all-rounder Johnny Muller's inclusion in Cricket's Hall of Fame. Ministers made their pitch on a visit to the cricketer's birthplace of Harrow in the state's far west.
Well, I'm here in the shadow of Johnny Muller to actually pay credit to a great cricketer, a great Australian and a great Aborigine.
Johnny Muller starred on the first Australian tour of England in 1868, belting more than 1,600 runs and snaring 245 wickets on just the 6-month tour. The news on the national weather is next, and then it's Sports Tonight with Tim Webster.
Sandra, thanks. Coming up, Aussie cyclist Robbie McEwen holds on to the Tour de France's green sprinters jersey. The debate continues over that NRL King hit. And in the AFL, Fremantle forward Jeff Farmer cited on video for kneeing.
Now to what Mother Nature has in store, and the synoptic chart reveals a strong high across most of Australia as the low that caused the weekend's big freeze in the southeast moves further into the Tasman. So tomorrow, mostly sunny conditions forecast in Cairns, showers for Brisbane, becoming fine in Sydney, a frosty start for Canberra. Melbourne can expect some showers. The Bureau says Hobart is in for a mostly cloudy day. Showers too clear in Adelaide tomorrow, a late shower for Perth, windy conditions in Darwin, and it should be fine in the Alice. Hollywood superstar Will Smith has come down under just in time to hear some good news. Maybe because he's stripped. His latest project has become his 6th movie to top the box office.
Will Smith is used to being on top at the US box office, but for Australian director Alex Proyas, it's all a bit new. The pair's movie I, Robot opened at #1 this weekend, and it could all be due to Will's first ever nude scene, which was Alex's idea.
I figure you're in the shower and you're completely naked. So I said, you know, if that's something that you want, Alex, as your actor, I am there for you, 100%.
In light of the box office results, it's no surprise Will and Alex form a bit of a mutual admiration society.
If I were gay, you know, and if I wasn't married, you know, I would love to have an Australian husband like Alex.
I definitely want to end it on the professional level, Will.
Yeah, you know, I mean, if that's what you need, you know, to work effectively, that we got to keep it professional.
One of the few Hollywood actors who avoids giving everyone their opinion on politics.
No comment.
I just have
politics and religion. No, sir.
Will is vocal about the possibility of an iRobot sequel being filmed at Sydney's Fox Studios.
If iRobot continues to be successful, we'll probably be here next year.
Angela Bishop, 10 News.
And that's the latest from the 10 News Centre for this Monday, the 19th of July. Sports Tonight with Tim Webster is next. I'm Sandra Sully from the Late News team. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again tomorrow. Good night.